All right, so these are your notes on Chapter 3, Classical India. Now, one of the most important skills in this class is being able to compare and contrast. There's a whole essay on it on the AP exam, where the only thing you have to do is compare and contrast between two topics. This is one of the skills that you have to get good at very quickly in here. So, we're going to start the year off by showing you how to compare things historically. And then we're going to get you used to writing about comparisons like this. And it probably doesn't sound real difficult, except the thing that you really have to get good at is not just saying what's similar or different. It's not just filling out a Venn diagram. What you have to get good at is explaining why similarities and differences exist. Venn diagrams are the enemy because they do not give you opportunities to explain. It just looks like, oh, well, that's the way it is, so why should I question it? No, the idea is to be able to understand why something is similar, not just accept the fact that it is and move on. So, when we look at Classical China, Chapter 2, and Classical India, Chapter 3, what do we see? Well, we covered the first one already in the reading quiz. What's China's government look like? Centralized. And who's at the top of it? The emperor. And what does the emperor rule over? People in all of China. Is there any part of China that the emperor does not rule over? No. What about in India? Is there an emperor? No. Is there a central government? No. So, now the important question. Why? Trina? That's exactly why. Nice job. India has a wide variety of geographical regions, which makes it virtually impossible to unify at first. For those that paid a lot of attention last year, who does that sound like? Geographically hard to unify. Greece. Same concept. Because of geography, India was hard to unify. How does that compare to China?
China was a lot of flat plains and rivers, so it was pretty easy to unify and communicate with each other.
Good.
They didn't have to travel over that.
Perfect. Perfect. China is geographically opposite. China is geographically contained. China is almost forced to unify because of geography, because you can't get out. It's like if we locked this classroom door and you were stuck here. We would have to work together because there's no place else to go. Whereas India is more like looking at the school as a whole, but we lock each classroom. Is there any way for the school as a whole to unify if everybody's locked in their own classroom? No. Well, right, and then you got people diving out of windows and rappelling down walls, and that'd be fun. You have a question, James?
No, someone just said something about the windows and the door and the...
You guys are already thinking about escape routes, huh?
Yep.
Busting open the tiles in the ceiling and crawling through vent shafts like it's Mission Impossible?
Yeah.
All right. We'll get the theme music queued up in a second. All right, so other bases of comparison. China's more secular, India's more non-secular. We covered that one in the reading quiz too. What's secular once again? Not religious. Why is that the case?
They have no true religion.
Because China has no true religion, or especially no true unifying religion. If all of China could have been Taoists, would that have been close?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not. So it's not. But what does India have that China doesn't? A true religion, Hinduism, that unifies its people. And so because of that, when you look at how India structures its society, What is their society based on?
Religion.
A religiously based, a religiously justified caste system. How does that compare to China?
China is acceptance, so if everyone does this, then everyone will be happy.
Right. China's is based on a philosophical moral code that does not require obedience because of some higher power. China just says, we want you all to do the right thing because it's the right thing. You know, like Mrs. K says every morning, you have lots of choices to make today, make great ones. Do the right thing for yourself. That's how China's doing it. India is saying, do the right thing or God on high will smite you with a thunderbolt. Because that's what the gods do. Now we look at similarities. What's the very first similarity we have here? Agriculturally based society. Is this a good similarity? Okay, is it true? Yes. Is it a good similarity? Do what, Steve? Okay, how so? Okay. Okay. So, in the sense that agriculture is an important characteristic, yeah, it's probably good to bring up. But let me give you an example here. If we were to compare and contrast all of you, and I was to say, well, one comparison that I can make, one way that you are all the same is that you are all Homo sapiens sapiens. Is that a good comparison to make?
No, that applies to everyone.
Because it applies to everybody, right? That's a pointless comparison to make. Is saying that they're both agriculturally based societies a useful comparison? Not really, because all civilizations are. That's what makes them a civilization. Every civilization we'll study is going to be an agriculturally based society. So should we ever use that as a useful comparison? No. Never. So if you are ever writing an essay comparing the ancient Greeks and modern Western Europe, well, they're both agriculturally based societies. No. No, 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 no. If that's the best you've got, you're in trouble. Is it true? Yes. Is it useful? Not at all. So maybe there's some better ones here. Majority of population are peasant farmers. Useful or not?
Sort of useful, because there are a lot of positions for
Okay. Potentially useful, depending. If we're comparing early civilizations, is that going to be true of most of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. If we're comparing it to something closer to the present, is that important?
Not really, unless you're
How many people are engaged in farming today? It's in the single digits in terms of percent of population in the U.S. Something like 2% of the population grows food for everybody else. That's what technology and machinery have done. So if we're comparing long ago to today, is that an important point to make? Yeah. If we're comparing ancient civilization to ancient civilization, is that an important point to make? No. So do you see how you can have true statements that still aren't necessarily useful? Does that make sense? Okay, this is one of the skills that you have to develop. Not only finding true comparisons, but finding comparisons that are actually worthwhile to talk about. Patriarchal societies, where women are relegated, which means forced to. Women are relegated into subservient positions. What's subservient? Lower positions, positions of obedience. So women are forced to be in positions of obedience to men. Is this an important comparison? No, because almost every society is patriarchal. So what do we have that's important? Significant internal trade. Not necessarily. A fair number. So really, what we're in the quest for now are significant similarities. And so this is one of the things that you need to be thinking about as we progress through the rest of the notes. We've got really good differences. Significant differences in government and in society and how society is organized. But our similarities suck. They're statements of the obvious, or they're statements that apply to everyone. You're all Homo sapiens sapiens, you're all wearing clothes, and I think, yes, you all have hair. See, you're all the same. Look at you. All right, so this is what we're looking for as we get into India. Be looking for ways that they are significantly similar to China. Can anybody think of one already?
They are a classical civilization.
Better, but we want to improve on that. Yes, ma'am. All right, depending on when we're talking about, we could say that they're both pretty isolated from the rest of the world, and so they have to do a lot of early developments on their own. One of the very first things we're going to find out about India, though, and this is a great transition, thank you, is that while China has their geographic features perfectly positioned to cut people off for the long term, India only has some geographic features that cut them off. There actually happens to be, well, first, what is right here? The Himalayan mountains. Pretty good natural barrier?
Yeah.
Like 1,000,000 times better than the Great Wall of China? Yeah, because it's already there. It doesn't take any slave labor. But the Himalayas don't follow the entire boundary of India. And so where this arrow is right here, anybody know what this passage is called? What's that? Okay. I don't either. I don't know that it has a name. But the important thing is that this is a small, narrow channel that allows you easy access into India. So, cut off by the mountains, isolated by the sea, except for this one narrow avenue where the doors are wide open. And so this is going to allow India to eventually become exposed to lots of people, whether it's people from Mesopotamia or the Aryan nomads from Central Asia or any number of other people that will eventually show up. So, some interesting things to note. One, India is geographically closer to the other major civilizations. One of the things I really miss about not being in a history room right now is not having a map. But if you can picture a map of the world in your head, picture where Greece and Rome would be in southern Europe. And then head just slightly east from there to where Mesopotamia would be in the Middle East. And then just slightly east from there is India. And then China is clear on the other end of Asia. So India, in terms of proximity, is closer to other people, which means there's probably a better chance they're going to meet other people. And as soon as other people meet, you have exchange. Exchange of goods, exchange of ideas, exchange of conflict. And so even though India is cut off to an extent, there's a small window that's going to allow them to have cultural contact with other civilizations. Now, one other important geographic characteristic we have to talk about, it's not really geographic, but it's weather, so whatever. India's monsoons. Why are those important? Nicholas?
It's a ton of rain from a short period of time.
Which does?
Farming, but it can also be very destructive.
Very good. Both points, exactly. The monsoon rains are necessary for agriculture to be successful, but at the same time, it can also be highly destructive. All right, we good here? Can move on? Yes? A yes or a no would be lovely at this point. Okay, thank you. Religion. Kind of the most important thing that we have to talk about with India, because it provides a foundation for pretty much all the rest of society. So when we look at religion in India, Hinduism is going to develop over thousands of years. We can find some of the earliest characteristics of Hinduism as far back as 6,000 or even 8,000 years ago. Now, that doesn't mean it was a full-blown organized religion, but we were already seeing parts of that faith in existence. It's not until Sanskrit, though. It's not until the development of a written language that Hinduism is able to be codified, that it's able to be organized on paper with beliefs and stories written down, that it truly becomes, bless you, that it truly becomes a dominant influence in society. And what's really cool about India, I mean, they go for extra credit on this one. They don't develop just one massive organized religion. They do two. What's the second one? Buddhism. You guys learned the story last year of how it starts, didn't you? Somebody want to give me the condensed version? Nicholas, I'm going to have to give you a quote of it. Come on, guys. You can't let him do all the work. You guys don't even bother anymore. You're like, Nicholas is going to answer it. So the question was, how does Buddhism start? Give me the condensed version. Three. Good. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Outstanding. Siddhartha Gautama was a Hindu prince. Where does that put him on the caste system hierarchy? Pretty much at the top. Just below what? Priests, Brahmins. Now, you need to understand the level of wealth that he had as a young prince. Did we talk about my trip to the French Riviera this summer? Okay. You guys know, or maybe you don't, how wealthy Loudoun County is. It's the highest median household income in the nation. You guys live in the richest county in the nation. I don't know if you knew that. You do. No, you are the richest in terms of average household income. The average household income in Loudoun County is roughly $98,000. Many, many, many people in Loudoun County make significantly more than that. But the average household income is almost $100,000 a year. It's amazing. It's the wealthiest county in the nation in terms of average household income. You guys are at the pinnacle. Where I went this summer with the group of students I took overseas was the southern coast of France. Southern coast of France is famous for its wealth. So we got off the bus in this little coastal town called Saint-Tropez. And we got off in the parking lot right by the harbor, where people park their cars before they, go get on their boat and go out in the sea, or go work in the shops that line the harbor. We get off the bus, Here's the first 5 cars I saw near our bus. Lamborghini, Ferrari, Ferrari, Porsche, Ferrari. And then 4 or 5 more cars down, it was another Lamborghini. And then as I walked further, there was a Bentley. And then as I got to the end of the harbor, surrounded by velvet ropes on 3 sides so nobody would touch it, was a Morgan. Does anybody know what a Morgan is? It's a very, very rare European car. It's gorgeous. Then you actually look out into the harbor. And it's where you see all these yachts. Now, some of your families may have a boat that you take out on the Potomac, or you may take down to, the Outer Banks. Maybe a fishing boat or a motorboat or a Sea-Doo or whatever. Let me explain to you what a yacht is. A yacht is the kind of boat that is big enough to have a garage on the boat to put your smaller boat in. The yacht is what you park out away from the harbor and then go into your boat garage to get your smaller boat to actually take you to land. Many of them have a second garage for their jet skis. And on the back of their boat is typically an open air area where they can have lunch or dinner served to them by the wait staff that lives full-time on board the yacht. Now, some of these harbors are big enough that you can back your yacht in and park it. Yes. And so you have million-dollar yacht after multi-million-dollar yacht lined up next to each other this far apart. If I ever own anything that's worth that much, I'm not letting anything this close to it. Especially something else that's worth millions of dollars and is just as big. I mean, I don't like parking my car in the same parking lot as you guys. Not you guys, but, them. And then you window shop in Saint-Tropez. And they've got the kind of designers that don't even show up on Fifth Avenue in New York because they're too expensive. You window shop in these places, and a blouse is €3,000, which is more than $3,000. A pair of chinos is going to run you $3,500, which is going to be about $4,000, $4,200. For a pair of pants. And that's the window display. And if you guys ever window shop at the mall, you know they don't put the most expensive stuff in the window. I have never felt so poor in my life. And I'm coming from the richest county in the nation. It's not the French, it's the people that live in the French Riviera. Because they're the heads of multi-million-dollar corporations. They're princes from Saudi Arabia that control oil interests. They're executives of Fortune 500 companies. Oh, they are very successful. That is the level of wealth Siddhartha has at his disposal. Oh, yeah. Well, it's very diverse in terms of what people look like. Yeah. But everybody's got a yacht. Everybody.
In terms of like ethnicity and nationality?
Exactly.
Okay. But not anything else really.
Right. Other than the color of their Lamborghini. That's the level of wealth Siddhartha has at his disposal.
In terms of today?
Well, he had even more in terms of today. But that level of wealth where money doesn't really have much value. I mean, if you can go drop $4,200 on a pair of pants, are you worried about money? No. If you have a multi-million-dollar yacht, are you worried about money? No, because if you have a multi-million-dollar yacht, you probably also have one or more multi-million-dollar houses, and probably more than one very expensive car, and maybe your own plane, and a wardrobe full of expensive clothes and jewelry. So by the time you get to yacht, right. And so if you can do all those things, are you worried about money? No. That's Siddhartha. That's his life in the palace in India, where he lives. at essentially the peak of the caste system. Well, and it does, because he begins to wonder what's outside of this palace. Now, for many of you, it boggles your mind that he could ever want to leave that palace. But he does. He wants to see what life is like. And so he figures out a way to get out of the palace and see the world just beyond his walls. And what he finds completely blows his mind. He sees people starving. He sees people dying from disease. He sees people dying from old age. He sees orphans without parents. He sees soldiers that have lost limbs from war. And he is now all of a sudden in shock because he can't wrap his head around the fact that not everybody lives like him. He didn't know. He had no idea. He had no idea that suffering existed in the world because there was no suffering in his life. None. He had every need cared for.
Knowing that old age seems like it would just, or should be the least shocking because...
But it's not.
I mean, the least shocking of all time.
Well, okay, maybe, but it's still pretty high on the shocking list. Because I can tell you, seeing my grandfather, well, two, seeing one battle cancer and one battle Alzheimer's, it is terrifying thinking of yourself getting to that point. Getting to the point where you can't trust your body or you can't trust your mind. It scares the crap out of me. Not the dying part, but the part before the dying, where my body might not function, where I might not remember my own family. That terrifies me. And this is something that Siddhartha is suddenly forced to come to grips with. There is suffering in this world, and he has to find a way to make sense of it. And so he leaves his palace. He actually had a wife and a child, and he leaves all of it. And he goes out into the wilderness searching for answers to this question, why is there so much suffering in the world? And he figures it out in a couple months. It's pretty impressive. And the short version is he figures out the reason there's so much suffering in the world is because we gauge our happiness based on stuff. We want stuff. Stuff will make us happy. When you guys get your first car, you'll be happy. When you go move out of your house and away from your parents and get your own place, you'll be happy. When you get your first real job and you get your own paycheck, you'll be happy. And you find out, no, I'm not happy because I want a better car. I want a bigger apartment. I want a better job. Then I'll be happy. Nope, still not happy. I'm going to be happy when I find that perfect someone and get married and ride off on a white stallion. Then I'll be happy. Nope, still not happy. I'll be happy when I have kids. Nope, still not happy. I'll be happy when the kids move out. Still not happy. I'll be happy when I retire. Still not happy. Siddhartha figures out that this is the reason there's so much suffering. Because people gauge their happiness, their contentment with life, on stuff. How does that compare to Hinduism's caste system? That was a pretty big jump, wasn't it? Siddhartha has just come up with a new belief system based on the idea that you shouldn't want stuff. How does that compare to the Hindu hierarchy? Emily? How? Exactly. What do you find as you move up each level in the Hindu caste system? What does your life look like? Better and better because you have more stuff. You have more food. You have more money. You have a bigger house. You have nicer clothes. You have a better job. The Hindu caste system is predicated on the belief that you should want more, and wanting more should drive your decisions. The whole reason you're going to follow your dharma in Hinduism, follow your moral path, is to get to the next life where you get better stuff. And Siddhartha says, no, that is all wrong, because it won't make you happy. And so he creates an entirely new religion a religion named after the title that he assumes, the Buddha, which means the enlightened one, someone who has learned and understood the meaning of life.
So Buddhism is basically
Trying to get to the point where you have divorced yourself from your desires, where you no longer need stuff to be happy. Because one of the last people Siddhartha met was an old hermit, a man who lived off by himself in nature, who was completely and totally at peace. And Siddhartha couldn't understand it because this man had none of the things that Siddhartha the prince had. And yet this man was happy. He had old raggedy clothes on his back and a hitch in his giddy-up. Couldn't walk straight. Bowed back, bad knees. Didn't know where his next meal was coming from. And this man was happy. Allie?
Is Buddhism kind of like Christianity where everyone has equal?
Yes. And so when you remove the caste system, people are now spiritually equal. In the Hindu caste system, what's the only way that you get out of the system of reincarnation? Where do you have to go? You have to get to the top. And then you're done. So the only people that can reach enlightenment in the Hindu caste system are who? The priests, the Brahmins. If you're not there, it doesn't matter how good your life is, you know you're not done. Exactly. Exactly. The Buddha says, no. Anyone can reach enlightenment in this lifetime, provided they learn one simple truth. Or, in this case, 4 noble truths, which is that life is pain and suffering. Life is pain and suffering because of our desire for material goods. The only way to end suffering is to end our desire for possessions. And if we can do that and follow the eightfold path, we will reach enlightenment in this life. Those are pretty different belief systems. And they're both in India. What do you think this is going to lead to? Conflict. Ultimately, Hinduism dominates. Because Hinduism provides the structure. Hinduism provides the rules, essentially laws, for how you have to act. Plus, if we're going to be honest, is it simple to get rid of your desire for stuff? Not at all. So Hinduism remains the dominant religion in India. And so where does Buddhism go? China. So when we come back to China, we're going to have to deal with how Buddhism interacts with what? Confucianism. Oh, Buddhism goes lots of places. It does. Absolutely. Yes, it is. All right, so a couple things about Hinduism real quick. Is Hinduism monotheistic or polytheistic? The answer is yes. There is, and I'll come back to this, so don't freak out, there is a single God in Hinduism. There is one God. There is one God who is everything. Brahman. How do you wrap your mind around the concept of a God who is everything? If you are Hindu and you are trying to pray to your God and you close your eyes, what do you picture? Nobody's going to be smart and be like a drop of water.
The aspect of the God that you're praying about?
Well, if we don't have aspects of God yet. If you just have a God who is everything, all things, everywhere, of all times. That's hard to do. We are lowly human beings. You need something in your head. Picture what you're praying for. Be like, God, whatever you are, whatever you look like, this is what I want. Do you see it? Okay, give it to me. So what Hinduism does is Hinduism breaks up Brahman into pieces. Brahma, the creator. Shiva. I think Shiva's the destroyer. Vishnu, the preserver. I don't even remember what Ganesha and Krishna do. But the idea is there are hundreds of what we call avatars. Hundreds of aspects of this one God. Hundreds of ways to make sense of this vast, mind-blowing deity that is all things. And so what Hinduism does is it allows for multiple interpretations of a relationship with a higher power. If it makes sense to you to just worship the creator aspect of your God, do that. If you are more focused on the preserver aspect of your God, then just picture that one and pray to that one.
So is this somewhat similar to Christianity, Holy Trinity?
Somewhat.
That's somewhat like...
More in the way that the Catholic Church functioned early on, where you could pray to Christ, you could pray to Mary, you could pray to any one of the saints that each represented kind of a component part of faith. So the saint of, the travelers, the saint of the merchants, the saint of the, something like that. Yeah.
I was thinking along the lines of just not praying so much as just the different aspects.
Yeah. Yeah. The Holy Trinity makes praying easier because it gives you something to visualize. You can just picture Christ, if that's easier than trying to envision the God who is everything. Unless you just picture Charlton Heston. That works too. That's all right. Alia?
Should we know, like, the certain gods and their roles?
That is not critical. You don't need to know all of the gods and their specific roles, or even the major gods and their roles. But just having a rough idea of who the main god is, and that he is broken up into parts. And he is not even the right term, because if he is all things, he is also she and it and they and everything else, which is why it gets so complicated. So there are different ways to pray. There are different places to pray. There are different prayers to pray. There are different clothes that you can wear when you pray. There are different designs that you can paint on your face to pray. There are bells you can ring and chimes that you can strike and different kinds of incense that you can burn. There are multiple ways to pray to multiple aspects of this one God. And so the only rule is you follow your dharma. You follow this moral pathway that everybody in your caste should follow. So then maybe you're thinking, wow, that's pretty broad, because there's what? 4 castes plus the Untouchables? A couple million people? 4 sets of rules? It's actually not the case. Each caste has subgroups called jati. And there's a couple hundred jati in each level of the caste system. So it's not just as simple as priests, warriors, merchants, everybody else. They get even pickier and pickier.
So is about that no marriage between different castes, does that mean the castes or?
That means the jati. Yeah, that gets really restricted, doesn't it, Paul?
So then it says you can't move up in the caste or down. Can you move up and down?
You can't move up and down during your current life. You are locked into your current position. And so even if you came across buried treasure and suddenly had $1 billion, if you're a peasant, guess what? You're a peasant. If you, well, they may even take your money because you're a peasant. You don't deserve that. And so following your dharma might mean, I'm supposed to be a poor peasant, so here, please take my money. Nicholas?
Does that mean that like our society should have rushing to a fabulous rich that have knowledge to
by the people above them, sure. So, there is hope, though, for the lower classes. If you are born a peasant, is your life going to be pretty rough? Yes, but what's your motivation now to at least be a good peasant? If you live out a good life and be a good peasant, you're going to move up. You're going to get a promotion later, and granted you have to die first, but there is hope in the long term. Emily? Good question. Yes. It is not sequential. You could live an unbelievably good dharmatic, I don't know if that's a word, life, and you could jump. Now, can you jump from peasant to priest? I don't know. I'm a little sketchy on the theology at that point. But do you have to move up through each level of the hundreds of levels before you get to the top? Not necessarily. And for those that don't work well on just a reward system, what's the threat of punishment here?
You get recredited.
If you screw up your life, you fall back down. Potentially into animal or even plant or stationary tree for that matter, which hopefully you can't screw up. It's tough to be a bad tree. Stephen? Blade of grass? Leaf on a tree? Cockroach? I don't know. I don't know if there is a bottom. Amoeba?
Barnacle?
Bacteria.
All right, so we're going to call that good for today. Because, actually, wait, hang on. Let me check something. Hang on, I may have to take that back. Okay, this is the last thing I want to show you, then we're done. This is the caste system. But it's the caste system with a story. The caste system has to be justified somehow. And the justification comes from God. God created the caste system. And who is God? Brahma. And so the story goes that, it's kind of a story of creation almost. That as Brahman is creating the world, he creates the priests from his mouth. What's the connection? Okay, they speak of him and interpret God's will to the people. But if we're thinking about the hierarchy, that's their function. Think about placement. Jasmine, what were you going to say? The mouth is at the top. And the mouth does what in comparison to the brain? Right. It turns the brain's thoughts into words and commands. So if God is the brain, or if the brain runs the whole body, which is God, the mouth is the mouthpiece. And, as Jasmine pointed out, it's at the top. Easy to visualize the hierarchy. The mouth is here. And then we look at the warriors. And the warriors are derived from God's arms and shoulders, his brawn, his strength, his might, his physical ability to fight and protect. And early in society, actually, the Kshatriya, the warrior class, was actually the top. In early Indian society, the warrior class was actually at the top. How does that make sense? Why would they be at the top? Don't look at the body, just think logically. Why would the warrior class be at the top? Hang on. Give me a hand. Somebody new. Yes, ma'am. Because they're the strongest ones. We talked about our example of the early farmers and how I made Paul do all my work for me because I was bigger than him. So early on, the warriors are going to be able to dominate society because they're stronger and they're better with weapons. But then over time, the priests are able to take control of society because what's their special power? God. Religion, the ability to interpret what God wants. So, priests come from the mouth. Warrior class come from the shoulders and the arms, the muscles of God. Traders and farmers come from the legs. What's the connection? Yes, ma'am. Okay, so they walk, they move, legs walk and move. Good. What else, Ever? Much like the legs. Excellent. Much like the legs help support the body. I mean, this is the trunk of your body. Much like the trunk of a tree. This is what holds the body upright and gives it stability. The traders and the farmers are what gives society its stability. The farmers make the food that allow people to eat and not die. That's kind of important, isn't it? That's society's trunk. That's its stability. And then at the bottom we have the common laborers, which are the feet. Somebody make the connection here. So, less cared for. I mean, if you look at your feet and or smell your feet, they are not as well cared for as your hands, which you wash, hopefully, much more often. But what else? What do the feet do? They move. They touch the dirt. So they move, which is an important function, because without it, we're stuck. And I'm stuck in the English hallway all day long. Without my feet, I don't leave this room. But out of necessity then, my feet get dirty. My feet are in contact with the ground more than any other portion of my body. So, they're dirty, but they're necessary, much like the laborers. But wait. We got a fifth group here. Untouchables. We're out of body parts. We've gotten to the bottom. There is nothing below the feet. They are outside of the caste system. Which is why you are not supposed to touch them. It's why you are not supposed to engage them in conversation. They are outside of the caste. They are outcast. Yes?
The Untouchables are outside the caste system. Does that mean they still apply to reincarnation?
Yes. And so you guys were talking about what happens if you don't live your life well. There are other options before you get to plant or animal. And untouchable is the worst of the human options. Now, don't pack up yet, because there's still plenty of time, and I got something else I want you to do.
What would happen if the Untouchables decided to live out their life trying to touch people?
Well, at that point, would the untouchable be following their dharma? No, they would be being a bad untouchable. And at that point, they would know that they are setting themselves up for a life that is even worse. And again, if you didn't get it before, there are hundreds of subgroups to this caste system. This is not a simplistic four-level organization, boom, 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 you're out. The untouchables are below those four levels. So if you picture it as a pyramid, Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, untouchables are outside of that group.
So there's like only a sliver of a level for them, the other level?
There's not a level.
No, I'm talking about like slivers of levels for each of the jhatis.
Right. Yes. Yes. Now, little food for thought here. Because oftentimes when we learn about this, it's in the context of history. Things that happened long, long ago, and wow, that's kind of interesting, Mr. Ackerman, I guess. But don't really care because it's not relevant today. Surely there are no untouchables today. Surely this doesn't apply to anybody anymore, and so while it might win me a couple bucks on Jeopardy someday, I can't really use this. Surprise! So take a couple minutes and read this article about contemporary 20th century untouchables in India.